But I think consistency and sustainable growth are the key. And if you look at the history of Nike, of Shopify, of StackAdapt, like these are 10 plus year trajectories where it's not they 10x, 100x overnight. It's they just doubled consistently for 10 years. And that's 1000x, but it just takes 10 years. But it's that consistency of doing it year after year that really gets you there. Welcome to the Product Market Fit Show, brought to you by Mistral, a seed stage firm based in Canada. I'm Pablo. I'm a founder turned VC. My goal is to help early stage founders like you find product market fit. Welcome to the Product Market Fit Show. Today, our guest is Vitaly, founder of StackAdapt, an ad tech platform that helps companies advertise across the open internet. StackAdapt has over 900 employees. They were started in Canada, but are now actually global and have employees across 10 countries. And this is the interesting part, which is they've actually raised under $5 million. In fact, their seed round was under $1 million, which is uncommon these days, but they've scaled in a really, really large way and over 9 years. So that really kind of brings us to the topic today, which is how to bootstrap to product market fit. Vitaly, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. Very excited to be here.
So let's start, at the beginning. As I understand it, you have kind of three co-founders, and you're not, you kind of tested things before, but this was really your first real go at it. Like, take us back to that time. I think it was 2013. Maybe just how you three came together and what the original problem set was.
Yeah, so I think what sort of helped us become successful in early days is the fact that all three of us have started independently number of different ventures that, with varying degrees of success, but none of them as successful as our company now. So when we met in 2013, we instantly gelled over previous failures, our ambition to build a big company together. And once we started exploring different ideas, we just gelled very well, just from kind of personalities perspective. And, in all honesty, like we barely knew each other at that point. We just, shared ambition.
How did you even meet?
So myself and one of my co-founders, we worked in like a sister company as part of one holding company. So we sort of like originally gelled with him over just poor state of advertising software. So for us, it was a pretty clear opportunity to do things better. So, and then the third co-founder, he comes from computer science background, so he was doing more like his experience lies in more real-time financial trading software. He's had a number of startups that he was trying to start as well. So his background is not in advertising, but his background is technical. So he currently still leads our engineering data science teams. And myself and my other co-founder, Ildar, we run the business side of things. So yeah, like the three of us have met and we just, wanted to just sort of go at it. And whether we would be successful or not, it was unclear at that point. I think my co-founder said it right at that point. He said failure is not an option. So we did have that attitude, but whether in fact we would be successful, I think that, to me was still unknown. It was yet to discover. I think there's a lot of things that fundamentally we knew that will be relevant years to come. So we wanted to double down on that. But whether we'd be able to work together, whether there's going to be some surprises in the economy, like none of that was obvious yet. So for us, we just said, let's go at it, let's keep building, and then sort of let the history unfold itself.
Did one of you come at it with like, okay, here's the idea, here's the thing we should do, or was it more you're from the ad tech space and you're like, we want to build something together, let's figure out what?
So it was a bit of combination of both. Even though our product fundamentally has not changed since the beginning. We still operate, in the advertising space. We still build software that marketers use to advertise. Sort of like the evolution of the product has, gone in directions that maybe I would not have anticipated in the beginning. I think there's some things that we knew will be universally relevant, like for example, user experience. We knew that will be always important because people will use more and more software. How they interact with software will remain important. So user experience is an important thing. We knew that machine learning will be one of those fundamental trends that is not going to reverse. So we wanted to continue pretty much right out of the gate, start investing into our data science capabilities. But a lot of products or directions or markets sort of evolved by virtue of experimentation. So even though I would say the broad strokes of our company was fairly maybe clear in the beginning, a lot of it was built and discovered and invented as the time went on. So I would say if I saw our company in the current state back in 2014 when we first launched, I think I'll be surprised. I think I'll be surprised just by virtue of how many new directions we are pursuing now and actively seeing a lot of success in.
And beyond knowing that you're going to focus on ad tech and some of the trends you're identifying, what was the original problem that you were trying to solve?
So the very original problem, it was kind of distilled down to the fact that a lot of users back in early 2010s started using mobile phones because they finally became fast, great resolution. So they started accessing a lot of content through mobile. But most publishers have not adapted yet their monetization strategies to mobile first experiences. So still back then, a lot of mobile websites were not responsive to mobile. Kind of the idea of zooming in to read content of back then it was like common. Nowadays, you basically never see this. So we started thinking like how to actually monetize this inventory. And the idea of native advertising started to gain a lot of sort of attention, and we've seen it being successful in platforms like big social platforms. So we said can that be adopted within mobile experiences across the open internet, but not just sort of integrated ad experiences, but also transacted in real time. So we called it programmatic native advertising. Sort of like that's when we went to market with. But that's sort of like the mechanism for where the advertising or how it looks. But the software platform itself, like it's the operational piece of like how marketers actually execute these operations. So that's sort of remained the same. Native advertising, still an important part of business for us, but since then we've expanded into all kinds of new channels like internet connected TV devices and streaming radio and video and digital billboards, in-game advertising. So essentially, it's just gone very broad now. But the web platform itself, how marketers interact with our company, that sort of like stayed from day one, and it's just kept evolving.
And just to be clear, like for the the listener who doesn't know much about ad tech, it's kind of, you think about a publisher, I don't know, let's say CNN or something like that. They have a lot of website traffic, a lot of content, and they're displaying it. Now they're moving over to, they have a lot of users that view it on mobile, and you were setting out to kind of help them maximize the revenue that they're going to get from advertising on their website, let's say on mobile. Is that like broad strokes correct?
Yeah, at first, because that ecosystem didn't exist, we actually for a little while worked directly with publishers, and then we shifted entirely to focus on marketers, and then another entity that sort of emerged around the same time, a number of entities, ad exchanges. So their mandate is essentially helping these publishers monetize their traffic. So we work with ad exchanges to actually deliver the advertising, but setting up all these rules is done within our web platform, which is essentially what we call the product.
Perfect. So I think the problem makes sense now. So taking us back to like 2013, it's the three of you. What do you decide to build first? I mean, even before that, like, do you have full-time jobs? Like you decide to just kind of quit and start coding and stuff, or like what, yeah, give us that context.
Yeah. So like, I think all of us actually tried starting companies before part-time, and it has not worked for any of us. So this time we said, if we want to give it a real shot, we have to do it full-time and just, put everything on the line and make it happen. So, with our backs against the wall.
Love it.
So,
Just burn the boats.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember, I think my first salary was about $500 for a month, and that was maybe like 9 months into starting the company, and that felt amazing, that
That's right.
felt
You
like
get
that
to
was
eat again.
yeah.
And so what is then, so the three of you quit, like what's the first iteration that you built, right? Like what is the MVP of this?
Yeah, like there's been a number of stages sort of that, even like pre-launch, of just even trying to understand, like, it sounds like, we had a pretty good idea, but like those broad strokes is not enough to sort of narrow it down to a very distinct product, right? Like just because it's great UI, AI, it's so broad, it can apply to anything, right? So we still needed to do a lot more like trimming down of our idea to be a lot more focused on what we want to do. Like we've done a number of things. So first, we've tried using some other platforms and just see, like for example, like open source software, so that we don't have to invest very heavily in building everything from ground up. So we try using third-party software to build on top of, like using open source. And that did not work for us. It was just very slow and clunky. So we scrapped that idea and said, let's take the harder path of building everything from ground up. That was, I think, an important decision, because even though it took longer, in the long run, it made us a lot more independent, because we had a lot more control over how the product is built. So like the direction of not building on top of anybody else's land was an important one, so that we can have that independence. And then second one, like one of the biggest validation for us came from just putting up a website explaining sort of the idea that we had, and it was like a one page website. And then amazingly, we had an inbound lead like a couple weeks later from large car maker, basically saying like, this sounds interesting, can we talk? And then later they became our customer, and that was like a way for us to understand like what are they looking for, and then we essentially had that MVP essentially built for them. And then once we started working with them, the rest was kind of like a snowball in some ways. So I would say, our discovery of that of our MVP was a product of experimenting, building on existing systems or existing like open source like software, kind of like a more maybe growth hacking, which at that time we didn't call it growth hacking. We just thought we wanted to do it, but then we got this immediate validation that there's something interesting there. So we didn't put up multiple websites seeing which ones stick. It's more like we had a rough idea of what we wanted to do, focusing on native advertising. We just that was the only idea at that point that we had, and it just got validated very quickly. So we were
Did
lucky
you
that.
do did you do any like traditional customer discovery type thing where you went out and tried to talk to like 20 of these, whether it's OEMs or any other types of publishers, or did you kind of like you got the one and then you just custom made it for them sort of thing?
Yeah, so we didn't do that kind of discovery, because we ourselves were sort of like the end user. In some ways, we were building product for ourselves. So in some ways, like we could put ourselves in the shoes of our customers and ask, is that something that we would want to use? So having that experience within the industry was really helpful. And I think that's in some ways, I think now I come to realize that it's it's helpful, at least in the B2B space, to understand the industry, because the markets are so large, and it's hard to know what's like an obvious idea and what's a more unique idea unless you understand the market really well. So having that experience in the market helped us uncover some maybe challenging and unique problems to solve, which may have been tough for outsiders, because the market is crowded, and there's just, even though it's large, there's a lot of players, and uncovering some unique pain points comes with just experience.
At the risk of getting into the weeds, like, do you recall, a couple of those nuances or call them unique insights that you had early on that you really felt were putting you, positioning you more uniquely to what others might be building?
I think it's probably, I'm going to think about some examples right now, but I think it comes down to sort of understanding maybe like maybe the degree of just understanding sort of what the customer actually values, right? Um, for example, one of the things that we've over the years learned is that our customers really value speed, and that's something that we still continue investing in. Is that to them, the speed with which they engage our company or interact with our company, they use software, really matters to them, and that's something that people consistently call out when they think about StackAdapt is the word speed. So we just kind of leaned into it. We didn't really originally think that that would be an important value proposition. One thing that, for example, we thought would be important early days that never really materialized. We thought that people, this might be a broader conversation, which we'll unpack, but we in early days, we, for example, we looked at big, or like really successful product-led type of companies that like Dropbox or Slack, and we thought like, oh, we're gonna have a platform where people create their own accounts, start running advertising themselves. But what we quickly learned is that actually people want to use software directly, but they also want to have lots of support because advertising is a complex topic. We realized that actually we need to mix services with software in a way that clients still use our software, but we can help them sort of maximize the use out of it. We can help them help them understand their business better, and then sort of solve their business problems using our software.
I think I think that's very valuable just in general for B2B, because I think a lot, first of all, product led growth is really cool. And second of all, everybody's allergic to services. And so there is this push towards trying to do this product led growth, trying to do just like this credit card sign up flow. And oftentimes, especially I think if you're doing something new, like in your case, you're going after mobile, which was kind of this new area at that time. And being able to hold customers' hands, especially in those early periods, like you think about something like Slack, sure, but we're talking about, basically instant messaging. I mean, everybody was used to that at the time. It was just in the B2B context was kind of novel, but everybody knew how that worked. Even Dropbox, sure, cloud is new, but storing things in files is pretty intuitive. And also there's kind of a bottoms up aspect and so on. What you're talking about and kind of moving these big companies into this new world of advertising on mobile, I think it makes sense that you require some handholding. And I think there's a lot of founders out there doing something in B2B that is, pretty novel, where they're better off, especially in the early days, adding a services component to it and being willing to really be there. And that's how you're going to get kind of drive the most value.
Yeah, I really believe that as you scale up, it's just really hard to build a business on just individual users at that small price point. There's very few companies that can actually attract, like 10 million users. And there's a reason why every enterprise company that starts with this kind of product-led, bottoms up growth eventually hires enterprise sales teams and sells top down. So I think even companies that start with that bottom up, like I think they should be prepared that, well, there's no reason not to sell top down as well. Like you should do both.
Makes sense. So going back to it now, you have this kind of inquiry coming inbound, and I assume you start chatting with them. Do you build something like to their specs? Like, is that how far you take it from a custom perspective, or how do you kind of balance that? I assume they're a pretty large customer.
Yeah, so at that point, it's really challenging, and I can. There's a number of customers, especially in early years, that I still remember that I distinctly remember like they were the ones that sort of pushed us to build something, right? And some of that was transformative, like in the beginning, like I remember thinking, I can't believe we're doing something for one customer. Like years later, I look back at this, and this becomes one of the critical capabilities of our product, and one of the major reasons for of our platform. I would say, a big part of our platform success. And so I think internally we sort of think about this kind of product feedback, whether it's the first customer or 10th customer or 1,000th customer. It's a balance of building a faster horse versus a car. I think maybe people are tempted to think like, well, if I'm starting building a new capability or entering a new market or building new, it needs to be a car. It shouldn't be a faster horse. I don't think there's a problem with building a faster horse. You need to have a balance, and as you grow, you need to have a balance of faster horses and cars. If if that analogy makes sense to everybody, but you need to have with faster horse, you have maybe more predictability. There's less risk involved because you get that direct feedback from customers of what they want, and you just build it for them. Versus building a car is essentially, speculating maybe or reading between the lines and in some ways gambling on a solution that would be adopted by our customers. And I think there's been a number of like faster horses and cars that we have in our product rosters that have been incredibly successful, but I wouldn't say like one over the other. It's a balance. So like that first customer, in some ways it was just a faster horse, and then we've over the years we've maybe spun up some net new innovation that didn't exist. So I would say there isn't a rule of thumb here. It doesn't have to be something groundbreaking that you think like, oh, it just needs to be completely novel. It can just be a better iteration of what exists already. And sometimes it's just taking direct feedback from customer, just doing what they ask you to do.
Well, that's kind of the question, right? Like it sounds almost too easy, too good to be true. Like do you have any maybe lessons from that where you can take that too far, like, or where you took it too far, where you just started getting into this mode that almost felt like, pure services company that's just building ad hoc for this customer? Or did you kind of always manage to really balance and kind of?
So we've always taken that because we have one product, like that product is not sort of customized for different customers. So like whenever a customer provides feedback, or like at least in early days, the way it was like they provide feedback, we essentially introduce it for everybody. So we never were in this situation where we build something unique for one customer and we have to build something different for different customers. So it's one product that essentially customers influence through feedback, and yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think everybody has built things that customers say they want, but in reality they don't use it. Or so it's. I think maybe it's a question of asking the questions right. But oftentimes, what I learn is that oftentimes customers, they don't know full context because they're not the insiders of your company, right? Sometimes you come to them and you say, would you want us to build this product? And they say like, oh, that's great. That sounds awesome. And you take that at face value and you build it and never gets used. We've built things like that. And it's not fault of customers. It's just, they could genuinely be excited, but it could just not fit their workflows, for example, or the way their organization is set up. So I would say, the way we've dealt with this over the years, and as the company grows, like we really need to move away from rolling the dice and make all our efforts a lot more predictable, so that whenever we build something, we have really high degree of confidence that it's exactly what customers want. And for us to do this is much more mature now. Yeah, customer interviews, we find ways to sort of like MVP specific capabilities of products and gain that initial traction and feedback before we invest more effort into it. We have the luxury now to be running many, many, many different experiments at the same time, and just sort of see what gets the most traction and invest more effort into it. In the beginning, you can only afford maybe running a couple of experiments. And sort of, now we have ways to actually just release certain capabilities to a group of customers, gain their feedback, continue improving on it, and then release it to everybody, knowing that it's gonna be used widely. But in those early days, I think we had a little bit of a more a cowboy approach to things, where like, customers said they will want it, and you also leverage much fewer data points, right? That you have a handful of customers, like you just don't know sometimes if that's important just for them or it's a universally valuable thing. So you kind of have to roll the dice a little bit in the beginning.
It's definitely more art than science in the early days. What did as you rolled out this customer and you had some traction? Did you try to kind of raise around, or was your next move to go get like 10 more customers?
Yeah, like we've just never stopped looking for more customers. Like we wanted to build a business that is not reliant on constant outside funding, and we're just not in the business that needs to do this, right? Like we're not doing some deep science for 10 years and then hoping to commercialize the product. We're selling in an enterprise space, so we should be able to generate revenue very quickly if there's a product market fit. So I definitely discourage people from sitting too long in their office building things. Like you want to have your product interact with customers as much as possible, because in the beginning it's going to go through a lot of iteration. So the sooner you get in the hands of customers, the better. And honestly, like I still show a screenshot of our very first sort of like MVP that we launched, and it's like it's very basic, and it's amazing that people used it. It's amazing. So you just never know. Like there's a lot of people that are totally okay with using some, very basic products. But that sort of interaction in the beginning is very useful.
Well, one of the questions I have for you specifically is like, and especially right now, I mean, 2022 second half is a tough year, probably going to, roll into 2023, and there's just not much liquidity out there. Everybody's going to have to do less, more with less. What I'm sure you've talked to a lot of founders like that you've seen, different founders. You were able to do a lot with very little. I mean, now you're over like you're close to 1,000 employees, over 9 figures in revenue. Like it's a big enterprise that you've built. What was it about? Was it like the philosophy that you had? Was it the types of customers you were serving that let you get where you got with such little outside capital? And like, what advice do you have for founders that now are struggling to raise rounds and are just going to need to do stuff with very little money? Like any kind of broad insights from bootstrapping a company to the scale.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, like looking back, in some ways it's good that we didn't have to raise that money at that time. We wanted to raise more money, we just couldn't. So I don't think like 2022 is much different than it was, through several different times in the last 10 years. Like there's been points when there's not a lot of money available for certain companies or for a segment in general. So I would say, it all comes down, I think, to your sort of operating model with the way you think about the business. For us, we just always had it to be very frugal, and we haven't started in Canada. Like, heard this many times before that, you guys are, a Canadian company. I could see why you're so frugal, like in the Valley, maybe you would raise lots of money. You sort of like, you hire and you build kind of anticipating the demand. We for a very long time, we had to sort of like really be very frugal with our investments to make sure that we're growing sustainably, that we're almost like always a little bit too busy than being less busy. But some of the internal kind of models that we've adopted, we constantly talk about 80-20 rule. Just like, what are the 20% of things that generate 80% of outcomes for us, and how can we do more of them? Have this internal program called Optimize to Maximize, where we just relentlessly finding ways to gain more economies of scale, more leverage internally, doing more with less. So even at our size now, we really try to challenge a lot of expenditures, a lot of we want to continue growing, but continue growing sustainably, and we've always wanted to grow sustainably. And in that earlier days, I think it probably matters as much as it does now, because I think there's one thing that you have the benefit when you're smaller, is that you can move much faster because you have fewer people. You can change direction so quickly. As you get larger, it gets slower, so you need to have those good habits from very early days. So I would say the things that consistently helped us was just focusing on fewer things and just recognizing like where's our success coming from? What is the type of customer? What is that value that they're getting from it? And just I think not getting distracted with other shiny objects or new ideas or new directions, because at some point you'll be able to tackle them. But in the beginning, I think I remember when we were like 20 people and we're talking about other ideas that it's like why are we talking about new markets and new customers? Like we just need to go after this one customer type and just saturate that market, and that will get us to 1,000 people essentially at the very least. Like right now, I look at our market, and I'm just like saying like we should just keep doing the same thing we've been doing, just for longer. There's no need to sort of distract ourselves. Like we can find new ways into that market and continue evolving our value proposition, but we need to stay very focused so that our everything that we do kind of hits one laser focus of our product and customer and the market.
I fully agree. It sounds to me like frugality, focus, and like sustainable growth are three key principles. Focus is probably the most talked about and least like truly appreciated value that I see in companies. I mean, every founder will tell you that focus is important, and few of them will really carry that through because they'll say that and then they'll say, "Oh, but by the way, we have to do this and this and this," right? And it's like, well, you can't. That's not focus, right? Like doing many things is not focusing. That's the exact opposite. And it's hard because there's so many ideas, there's so many possibilities. But I agree. I mean, if you are trying to go from 10K to 20K, from 1 million to 2 million, and you feel you need an entirely new product, an entirely new market to do that, there's something wrong, right? Like you're not at that stage yet.
Yeah, the markets are way bigger than we think. And sometimes it's natural as you grow to hit sort of like these plateaus where maybe you need to tweak, maybe you need to expand a little bit on like maybe you need to invest in certain areas of your business to be more competitive and to continue growing. But generally, as a small company, I would not expect somebody to hit the plateau because they run out of customers. There's the customers is out there. It's more about your ability to reach them and ability to deliver that value. So like those areas of investment, if you're hitting plateau, you should just create more value and you should invest in better distribution systems. But I would not attribute that to not enough money in the market, unless it's something so niche and so unique. But I doubt that's what most companies are.
I fully agree. The other piece I want to touch on is this idea of sustainable growth, which I think is topic du jour. Like, what did you like looking back? I think you mentioned something like you've effectively consistently doubled every year. Is that early on something you set out to do? Like, and I'm coming to this roundabout ways, but a lot of companies want to grow as fast as possible, triple, quadruple, 5x. It's hard to do that. Period. It's hard to do that more than 1 year in a row. Was that a mindset you had, like, hey, let's not go after this crazy shiny thing, let's just keep doing what we're doing, but let's just double every year? Or is that, looking back, just what ended up happening organically?
In the beginning, it happened organically. Then we started really challenging ourselves to keep up that growth. And you know, every time we look at those numbers, and I was like, how are we gonna do this? And then we were able to do it every year. So it's been a amazing run, and we want to we really feel like we still have so much room for growth. So I look if I was to meet myself when I was like, I don't know, in 2014 or 15, I would tell myself like, you have way more room to grow than you think. So I think now we've kind of opened our mind to the fact that there's just a ton of opportunity, a ton of room for growth. We just need to be a better company to take advantage of these opportunities. So we just need to continue growing up, continue evolving, continue innovating. But the opportunity is there. Certainly, as you get bigger, you need to develop the maturity and the muscle to be able to predict and hit those numbers. In the beginning, I think it matters a bit less because you're just trying to survive. And those numbers in the beginning, we just kind of like put a number on the wall. We're like, okay, this almost meaningless because like we have no historical values. Now, we've been in business for many years. We can, we're getting better and better and better at predicting, where we need to land. And, we're building systems now to actually hit those numbers. And there's some expectations to be there for any larger companies. But in the beginning, I think it's important to like growth at all costs needs to make you need to make sure that you're growing fund. You're not just buying revenue, right? Like you're raising a bunch of money. And I think in earlier days, I think we've agreed between ourselves that if we raise more money, we'd probably just spend more money because it's easy to spend money and buying growth. If the money dries up, then you're going to be in trouble. So I think for for having a lot of cash that they spend acquiring customers, you can get lost in the fact that maybe those customers don't retain very well, or your unit economics are totally broken. And that's why we see a lot of companies getting hammered because they had a lot of dry powder and they just buy customers, buy business, but there might be some troubling areas. So it's not a the market. There's a lot of opportunity, and it's rarely, the window rarely closes so quickly. I think it's better to just kind of be a bit slower but more strategic. And then this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. Like what's the value of like raising a bunch of money, acquiring a ton of customers, running out of money, and dying? It's a marathon. You need to strap yourself in for at least 10 years of an endeavor, 10-year plus. And if you look at it with that perspective, you just start treating things differently a little bit. Of like, okay, well, we want to reach ambitious goals, but it requires deliberate strategic investment and certain steps that need to be taken along the way to get there.
That's totally right. I think consistency and sustainable growth are the key. And if you look at the history of Nike, of Shopify, of StackAdapt, like these are 10 plus year trajectories where it's not they 10x, 100x overnight. It's they just doubled consistently for 10 years. And that's 1,000x, but it just takes 10 years. But it's that consistency of doing it year after year that really gets you there. Circling back a little bit, and this is really kind of one of my last questions is, you had the customer, things are going relatively well. When you got, just to get your first like 10 or so customers, what approach did you take? Did you start just getting a bunch of inbound, or did you kind of spin up a traditional kind of outbound sales? Like how did you get those first kind of next 10 customers or so?
I mean, for us, we've always been, I would say we've always been too eager to wait for people to come to us. So we've been just always very, very focused on outbound sales. And, it just, like knowing our customer, it just, you start looking, okay, well, what is the universe of those customers? How can we get to those customers as soon as possible? And you start realizing that oftentimes the quickest path to them is just picking up the phone or emailing them. They might not ready to buy, and that's a different story. And that's where marketing comes in. And as you grow bigger, you want both. But I would say in those early days, waiting for customers to knock on our doors was just too excruciating. So we just took our destiny in our own hands, and we just said like we need to generate that demand. So we were doing sales.
Love it. Okay, well, I'll ask the question I always end on, which is, because it is the product market fit show after all. When did you feel like you had true product market fit?
Never, in a sense that it's always a moving target. There's been many stages, like several stages throughout the life of our company where I felt like, we're doing really well. But in those moments, if I trace it back, I always thought, okay, what is the next stage? How can we find more similar customers like that? How can we solve broader set of problems for our customers? And now our company solves many different pain points for the same customer. And so each one of those solutions has its own mini product market fit. So I would say it's going into 2023, more than anything, I think of like how can we expand our customer base? How can we solve more problems for our customers? So that being in business for almost 10 years, like that still is relevant. So I don't think there's ever been a point where we've set and forget, like this is our customer, this is our product. If you ever get to that stage, I think you can start counting days until things will start, going backwards. It needs to be just always on discovery and evolution of value and the customer.
Perfect. Well, we'll end it there. Just to quickly recap on the episode, you started off with three co-founders. You had some experience in ad tech, which I think is something that can't be missed, especially for first-time founders. Is if you're going B2B, having some deep knowledge of the area you're going, at is extremely important. And as a result, you kind of got to skip a lot of more traditional textbook customer discovery because you had a better sense of the problems that really need to be solved at a deep layer. And there's serendipity and everything. I think you had a customer come in, you went with that. And I think there was these key themes that played out, which was aggressiveness, focus, and just really always moving the ball forward, right? Doing outbound, doing what it took to get that next customer. And, 10 years later and 10 doublings later, now you're at a scale that puts you at the really top of a pyramid in Canada. And I think there's a lot of key lessons in this episode that the first-time founders would benefit from, again, especially because you've done it bootstrapped. And I think, that's a path that many more founders should take, and B, a path that many founders will have to take in these coming years. So thank you for sharing all that with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening all the way through. It's been a pleasure having you here. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode.